Hi everyone, this is Eliza. I am the Director of Counseling at McLean Bible, and I am here today to talk to you about a pretty heavy subject, so we're just going to touch the surface of it, and that is the subject of medication and diagnosis. I'll start with medication. Medication is, speaking of like medication for mental health issues, it's a tricky subject, and what I will say is that it's a personal subject and it is an issue of liberty, which basically means you get to decide, and you decide that with medical providers, your doctor or whoever else is a part of your team of care. And it's a decision that you will probably not necessarily land on one decision and then stay with it the rest of your life. It might be something that you kind of work throughout your life, but it is an issue of liberty. It's a choice that you get to make. One thing that sometimes people will say is, well, let's say if I take medication for anxiety, will I actually do the work that I need to do in my heart to make sure that I'm dealing with sin or dealing with areas of faith that I need to strengthen and so forth? If I take medication, will I stop being concerned about those things? And certainly that could be a caution, but I will say in my experience, that isn't the case. That most of the time believers really do want to make sure their life is aligned with Scripture, and taking medication doesn't change that. In fact, I will say that in my experience, sometimes it's actually very helpful. If you're dealing with so much anxiety that the truth of Scripture kind of bounces off of you because there's so many other thoughts going in your mind, sometimes the medication can kind of turn down the volume on those racing thoughts and those anxious feelings so that you can receive that Scripture and so that you can move towards obedience in whatever work God is revealing for you. So don't necessarily think that medication is going to mean that you don't do that work, because actually it may be the avenue that helps you go deeper into that place of really seeing what God is doing in your heart. But again, it is a liberty issue. It is a choice that you make with those who are walking with you in care. So then let's talk just briefly about the issue of diagnosis. That's a hard one, and it covers so many different areas. Definitely won't be able to talk about it here in this few minutes, but what I will say is, as a believer, when you think about diagnosis, one thing that I would say is, if you've been given a mental health diagnosis, know that it is not your identity. That is not all that there is about you. Just as much as somebody who has a diagnosis of diabetes or high blood pressure or high cholesterol or even cancer, they don't want to be identified as that diagnosis. And so don't let that be the case for you as well. There is so much more to you than a diagnosis, and a diagnosis can change. Just like other diagnoses, somebody can be diagnosed with a very serious medical condition, then later not have it. And so, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a life sentence, and it does not mean that that's all there is to you. So I hope this has been helpful, just to kind of think just briefly about those two subjects as believers, how we can think through that, trusting that God is in all of the things that come at us, and He is able to give us wisdom to navigate those things. So hope this has been helpful for you.